Welcome to One Wrong Move, where one small decision set the whole chain in motion. Today's story starts with 5 minutes in the back of a London restaurant and ends somewhere nobody saw coming. How much can 5 minutes cost? For most people, 5 minutes is nothing. A song on the radio, a scroll through your phone, a wait for the elevator, the time it takes to boil an egg. But for one man, 5 minutes in the back of a London restaurant became the first bill in a chain that would run for more than 20 years. His marriage, his fortune, his reputation, his freedom, none of it fell in one night. But that night started the public collapse, and it took over 20 years for the full bill to arrive. This is the story of Boris Becker, world champion at 17, multimillionaire by 20, convict at 54. And it all started with one impulsive decision on a summer night in 1999. One moment he couldn't take back. One wrong move. July 7, 1985, Centre Court, Wimbledon. Nearly 15,000 people crammed into the stands to watch the men's singles final. A 17-year-old German kid with a huge serve and zero fear was playing for the title. Nobody had picked him. He wasn't seeded. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was the outsider in a final the tournament had not been built around. 2 hours later, Boris Becker was the youngest man to ever win Wimbledon, the first unseeded player to take the title in over a century of the tournament's history. He was 17 years and 227 days old, and the world had just learned his name in a single afternoon. He defended his title the very next year, won it a third time in 1989, added 2 Australian Opens and a US Open, 6 Grand Slam singles titles in total, 49 career titles overall, world number 1, Olympic gold medalist. By his mid-20s, Boris Becker was one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet, and his face sold everything from cars to coffee in 3 languages. Germany didn't just respect him, Germany worshipped him. They called him Boom Boom, a nickname earned by the serve and the temperament behind it. He played with a fury that crowds couldn't resist, diving across the grass, screaming at himself, fist-pumping after every ace. He wasn't just a tennis player, he was a spectacle, and the money followed the spectacle the way it always does. By the time he retired in 1999, Becker had earned over $25 million in prize money alone. Years later, in court reporting, his total career earnings were put around $50 million once endorsements, appearance fees, and business deals were counted. By any reasonable measure, he should never have had to work another day in his life. The lifestyle expanded to match the income. Properties in Monte Carlo, Miami, London, and Munich. First-class everything. A personal entourage that grew to fit the size of the rooms he walked into. The kind of spending that makes sense when you're winning Grand Slams, and does not when you stop. Becker himself described it later with alarming honesty. Quote, "I won my first million at 17. Money goes out of the window. You lose the sense of value. You don't know what a million is. You don't know that 99% of people would never earn $1 million." End quote. He said that publicly in interviews. He understood the problem intellectually well enough to put it in print, and it made no difference, because nobody around Boris Becker ever told him no. Not his agents, not his advisors, not his friends, and certainly not himself. The understanding never reached his bank account. June 30th, 1999. London. The Wimbledon Championships were underway, but Boris Becker wasn't competing. His final professional match had been just days earlier at that same tournament. His career was effectively over. He was still attending Wimbledon as a spectator, sitting in the stands with his wife Barbara Feltus, who was 7 months pregnant with their second son. It had been a frustrating day. Barbara went back to their accommodation early. The heat, the pregnancy, the long afternoon at the All England Club. Becker decided to go out for dinner alone. He wanted to clear his head. He walked into Nobu, one of the most exclusive restaurants in London, took a seat at the bar, and ordered a drink. The next 5 minutes took less time than boiling an egg. The bills they helped set in motion would reach more than most people earn in 10 lifetimes. Also at Nobu that night was Angela Ermakova, a Russian-born model in her early 30s. She was striking. Becker noticed her immediately. A few words at the bar became a conversation. A conversation became something else. The whole thing happened at a pace that would barely fit on a single page of a screenplay. They slipped away from the main floor, Where exactly became the subject of years of tabloid obsession? The broom cupboard, the back stairs, a side room. Becker would later say it was a back area, not a cupboard. The press didn't care about the distinction. The geography didn't matter. What mattered was this. Becker later framed the encounter as about 5 minutes, from the first word of conversation to the moment he walked back to the bar and finished his drink. 5 minutes. The number became part of the story before anyone knew there was a story to tell. He left the restaurant, went back to his hotel, and thought nothing of it. Just another night out. Just a meaningless moment, except nothing about it would turn out to be meaningless. 8 months later, Boris Becker received a fax. It was worded like a business letter, calm and formal, the way someone writes when they want to be sure they cannot be misunderstood. It referred back to their meeting at Nobu in London, and then it delivered the news. Angela Ermakova was pregnant. The baby was due any day, and Angela Ermakova was claiming Boris Becker was the father. Becker's response was immediate and total denial. He told his lawyers nothing significant had happened at Nobu. He told Barbara the same. He was adamant in every direction at once. This couldn't possibly be his child. The math couldn't work. The encounter, if it had happened at all, had been too brief. His legal team went further. They floated an extraordinary theory to the press. Angela Ermakova had somehow preserved Boris Becker's genetic material and used it to impregnate herself without his knowledge. The tabloids exploded. Sperm theft screamed every headline in Europe in font sizes normally reserved for wars. On March 22, 2000, a baby girl was born. Angela named her Anna. And in February 2001, a DNA test ended the circus permanently. Boris Becker was the father. There was no theft, no conspiracy, no frame-up, just consequences. The scandal detonated Becker's marriage. Years of tabloid scrutiny had already worn it thin. A paternity claim, a coming DNA test, and a public humiliation neither side could control finished the job. Barbara was not the kind of woman who absorbed humiliation quietly. Barbara filed for divorce in Miami-Dade County Court. It was a strategic choice. The couple had signed a prenuptial agreement in Germany that entitled her to $2.5 million in the event of a divorce. Filing in Florida instead opened the door to a far larger settlement under American family law, and that was exactly the door her lawyers wanted opened. The proceedings were broadcast live on German television. Millions of viewers watched their national hero's private life disintegrate in real time. It was the biggest celebrity divorce story in Germany in a generation, and the country could not look away from it. The prenup said $2.5 million. The final settlement was $14.4 million. Barbara also received their condominium on Fisher Island, Florida, one of the most exclusive residential communities in the United States, and full custody of their 2 sons, Noah and Elias. The difference between what the prenup guaranteed and what the infidelity actually cost. Roughly $12 million. That was the premium on 5 minutes in a restaurant. And Boris Becker was just getting started. With the divorce barely finalized, the next bill arrived. By the early 2000s, the paternity settlement was in place. Becker was ordered to buy Angela Ermakova a house in London where she and Anna could live while their daughter was growing up, close to schools, close to lawyers, close enough to keep an eye on. On top of the house came ongoing child support, educational expenses, and a trust fund for Anna. The total settlement was widely estimated at around £2 million, a price tag that grew, slowly and quietly, every year that Anna kept growing too. Combined with the Barbara divorce, Boris Becker had now lost roughly $18 million. The first bills in the chain all traced back to 5 minutes at Nobu, and the meter was still running. If this story is already making your jaw drop, hit subscribe, because it gets worse, much worse. Let's stop and count. $14.4 million to Barbara, £2 million to Angela. Legal fees for both cases, conservatively another $1 million. That's roughly $18 million gone from a career that earned around $50 million total, and he wasn't even halfway through the damage. While Boris Becker was writing checks to his ex-wife and the mother of his 3rd child, an entirely separate set of problems had been building. quietly, in the background. Problems he created all by himself long before that night at Nobu. In 2002, the same year the paternity case was settled, German tax authorities charged Boris Becker with tax evasion. For years he had claimed to be a resident of Monte Carlo, where there is no personal income tax. It was a convenient arrangement for a man who earned in dollars and spent in everything. The problem was, it wasn't true. Investigators determined that Becker's primary residence was actually in Munich. He had been filing false declarations for years, saving himself approximately 1.7 million euros in taxes he legally owed. The Munich District Court convicted Becker and handed down a 2-year suspended sentence in the tax case. He avoided prison, but the pattern was now public. He had been living like the rules didn't apply to him. That time the court let him walk out of the building, the next time it would not. And the tax case was only one leak in a ship already taking on water. Divorces, child support, tax liabilities, legal fees. Boris Becker was bleeding money from every direction at once, and there was no sign of it slowing down. You might think that after everything, Boris Becker would have recalibrated, downsized, gotten professional financial help. He didn't. In 2008, he began a relationship with Charlie Lily Kersenberg, a Dutch model. They married in June 2009 in St. Moritz, Switzerland. Their son Amadeus was born in 2010. For a while, it looked like stability, a new family, a fresh chapter. But by 2018, the marriage had collapsed and they separated. Like everything else in Becker's life by this point, the exit was expensive. 2 marriages, 2 divorces, 4 children across 3 relationships, each carrying ongoing financial obligations that stretched years into the future. The income from tennis had long since stopped. The outgoings never did. By the mid-2010s, Boris Becker's finances weren't just struggling. They were in free fall. The playing career was over. The endorsement deals had dried up. His coaching role with Novak Djokovic brought income, but nothing close to what he was spending. The lifestyle had never adjusted to the new reality because Becker had never accepted the new reality existed. He had made a string of bad investments over the years. Business ventures that promised returns and delivered losses. Real estate in the wrong markets at the wrong time. He was burning through capital he didn't have and borrowing to fill the gap. The borrowing kept the lights on. It also kept the meter running. On June 21, 2017, a London court declared Boris Becker bankrupt. The immediate trigger was a relatively modest unpaid loan of £3 million on his estate in Mallorca, Spain, but the underlying debt was staggering. £50 million. That was the number. Boris Becker, whose career earnings were reported around $50 million, now owed £50 million, more than his entire career had generated. He hadn't just spent it all. He had gone that far past zero and kept going. At trial, Becker tried to explain how it happened. 2 expensive divorces, child maintenance across 3 families, a tax conviction, bad investments, and what he called expensive lifestyle commitments. He had simply never stopped living like a champion, long after the championships ended. When you're declared bankrupt in England, the law is unambiguous. You must disclose every asset you own, every property, every bank account, every investment, every item of significant value. The insolvency trustee needs the complete picture to fairly distribute what remains to creditors. Full transparency. No exceptions. Boris Becker chose not to cooperate. He concealed a property in Lehmann, Germany, his hometown. Investigators also said he moved money through accounts linked to his ex-wives instead of fully disclosing it to the trustee. The man who had been told no by no one in his entire adult life now applied the same posture to a court order. Maybe he thought the investigators wouldn't look hard enough. Maybe he thought his celebrity status would shield him the way it always had. Maybe he just couldn't accept that it was over, that the money was gone and now even the remnants had to be surrendered. Whatever the calculation, it was wrong. The insolvency investigators found everything. Every hidden account, every undisclosed property, every suspicious transfer. In April 2022, Boris Becker was found guilty of 4 charges under the Insolvency Act. It was the same pattern that had defined his entire downfall. A quick decision. A gamble that he wouldn't get caught. a refusal to face the consequences of his own choices, the same impulse that took him to the back room at Nobu 23 years earlier. Drop a like if you want the last number in the chain. It is worse than the 5 minutes that started it. April 29th, 2022, Southwark Crown Court, London. Boris Becker stood before Judge Deborah Taylor in a dark navy suit and heard his sentence: 2.5 years in prison. The judge was blunt. She said Becker had shown little remorse and had repeatedly failed to cooperate with the bankruptcy process. He had been given chance after chance to be transparent. He had ignored them, one after another, until the court ran out of chances to give. Becker was taken first to Wandsworth Prison in South London, one of the most overcrowded and notoriously grim facilities in the country. Built for under 1,000 inmates, holding well over 1,500. He later described the experience as terrifying and deeply isolating. He was eventually transferred to Huntercombe Prison, a lower security facility for foreign nationals. The conditions were better, but it was still prison, still locked doors and counted hours, and the grinding reality that Boris Becker, 6-time Grand Slam champion, was now just another inmate number on another corridor. He served 8 months. On December 15, 2022, Boris Becker was released and immediately deported to Germany under a fast-track removal scheme for foreign national offenders. The 3-time Wimbledon champion left England, the country where he had built his legend, in the back of a deportation transport. Back in Germany, Becker began the slow work of rebuilding. An Apple TV documentary, Boom Boom, The World vs. Boris Becker, aired the following year and walked through the wreckage in 2 parts. Becker also returned to interviews, including a high-profile one with German broadcaster Sat.1, trying to explain how a champion had ended up at the bottom. In April 2024, after nearly 7 years, Boris Becker was finally discharged from bankruptcy. The court determined he had done all that he could reasonably do, but he still owed creditors millions. The discharge was a legal milestone, not a financial recovery. The arithmetic of Boris Becker's life is almost impossible to believe. Around $50 million in reported career earnings. 6 Grand Slams, world #1. And at the end of it all, 2 divorces, 4 children he couldn't fully support, a tax conviction, bankruptcy, prison, and deportation. All of it traceable, one way or another, to choices he made. The public collapse started with the one that lasted 5 minutes. Boris Becker didn't lose his fortune to a market crash, or a bad business partner, or forces beyond his control. He lost it to himself. One impulsive night, one denial that made everything worse. One failure after another to face reality before reality faced him in a courtroom in South London. Later, Becker admitted that money had warped his sense of reality. Nobody told him no. Everything felt possible. Looking back, he saw it as a recipe for disaster. 5 minutes at Nobu. $50 million gone, not in one instant, but brick by brick, over 23 years. 5 minutes at a bar. A £50 million collapse. One wrong move. If this one got you, hit subscribe. One wrong move drops a new one twice a week, and the next one is worse.